I bring in my guy, the senior NFL reporter for Yahoo, Charles Robinson. He joins the Rich Eisen Show. Kirk Morrison here filling in for Rich. Charles, could you explain what Ryan Tannehill is trying to say? He keeps doing this every single year. We know what he wants to say, but yet he doesn't say it. Just say it, Ryan Tannehill. I know that my days are numbered. Why doesn't he just come out and say it, Charles?
Yeah, they're not going to be I don't think you're going to be playing guitar, singing around the fire in the quarterback room in the 2023 season. I think Ryan knows that just from a financial standpoint, I think from an age standpoint, and the fact that now the org is taking swings on two young quarterbacks in back-to-back seasons, that, look, the writing's on the wall, and he should have known this, and I think he had to have known this in February. We've gone a couple of months now, and I think really most recently back to the NFL owners' meetings, it was getting around the league that the Titans were making calls to other teams about Ryan Tannehill. And what I called it was sort of a pocket listing, like, hey, we're not really shopping Ryan right now, but we're wondering, would you be interested in Ryan Tannehill if something develops and we decide to go in another direction? I think that other direction initially was expected to be C.J. Stroud. They did all their homework on the quarterbacks. I think that's what they were trying to do, was to move up to number 3 to take Stroud. And I think if that had happened, they would have then tried to, perhaps on the clock or immediately after the draft, try to find a home for Ryan Tannehill in that contract. I don't think there was a lot of traction out there, honestly, to bring Ryan in. I think especially once Aaron Rodgers got done with the Jets, Lamar Jackson got done with the Ravens, there weren't really a lot of spots where teams sort of felt backed into a corner and needing to bring in a veteran like that. But, like you said, say what you mean. Your days are numbered, and it's probably frustrating to have to go through this again. But we went through it last year, and as we saw, Malik Willis wasn't ready. We have no idea what Will Levis is really going to be able to live up to at this point. So he may have that job longer than even he thinks.
Charles, the NFL draft was just a week ago, right? How quickly this week has went by. We've finally had a chance to exhale, right? Relax a little bit and sort of analyze the draft in its totality. For you, now that it's over, who do you think was the biggest winner of last week's draft?
Well, look, everybody talks about Philly, which I get. Jalen Carter for the value, right, where Howie Roseman was able to take him at 9. And that's great. I think Jalen has some concerns. I think there were maturity concerns, but Philly had the upside of Jordan Davis was a guy who was really close to Jalen Carter when they played together at Georgia. The way it was described to me was Jordan was kind of a big brother to Jalen there. And so there's a little bit of that Georgia community already built in to the Eagles, and it made that landing spot and the ability to kind of help Jalen Carter grow, as a person and a player. It was a good landing spot for him with Philly. Nolan Smith getting him at the end of the first round. Tyler Steen, the tackle out of Alabama. You see Howie Roseman going back to Georgia and Alabama quite a bit the last couple of years. Clearly, he's seeing, the high-end results out of high-end players, and that's what he wants to build in Philly. But that was the obvious one. I actually thought the Colts had a better draft than maybe they got credit for. I haven't looked at all the grades, but I mean, just right, from the size of their class, massive in a draft like this. I think tight end depth, there was depth here and there, but most people consider this sort of a C draft. Well, if you stack a lot of bodies, you're going to have some hits. And I just think top to bottom, they picked the most players. And, they also, I thought, got some value on some guys. Josh Downs was, some teams had Josh Downs, closer to a first-round grade. They end up getting him in the third round. And everything's going to be about Anthony Richardson, though. I think we all know that. If they hit big on Anthony Richardson, that's going to be a franchise-changing piece for, who knows how long that kid could play, 15 years, 20 years.
We're talking with Yahoo senior NFL reporter Charles Robinson. You can follow him on Twitter at Charles Robinson. So, Charles, there was good news and bad news over the last couple of weeks in the NFL. Good news is that Aaron Rodgers was officially traded to the New York Jets from the Green Bay Packers. Good news is that Lamar Jackson signed his contract, the richest contract in NFL history with the Baltimore Ravens. That was the good news. Charles, the bad news is that we don't have any stories now. We're getting to that point of the NFL offseason where we needed that story that you can talk about every day that would lead in your A-block news of the NFL. We don't have that story now. The draft just ended. We don't have that story now. So for you, what should we expect over the next couple months? What is that story that's going to continue to keep driving NFL news until we get to training camp?
Well, we can stay in that quarterback lane. I mean, what's remarkable about this is, Hurts got done. Wow, massive deal. Lamar's deal gets done. Wow, massive deal. Aaron moves on. But remember, you still have two guys that are up right now, and you can extend them right now in not only Joe Burrow in Cincinnati, but Justin Herbert with the Los Angeles Chargers. I actually think, low-key, those two negotiations are going to be even more interesting than what we just saw go down with Baltimore and Lamar Jackson, because you have two organizations with the Chargers and the Bengals that have the reputation, and people can argue whether it's deserved or not.
Go ahead, say it, Charles. Say it. Go ahead.
Yeah, they're cheap. Okay, right?
There it is. It's okay.
They're not backing up the Brinks truck, okay? Unless it's the ownership's house. That's not really where the Brinks truck's getting backed up. They're not, considered these cash-rich franchises that like to have a ton of money in escrow because of the funding rules. So basically, you have two owners, and the Spanos family and Mike Brown with the Bengals that are sitting there and saying, "We'd love if we could get a deal done like a Patrick Mahomes deal." He locked himself up for a decade with the Chiefs. It was for a ton of money, but it was so much control that was kind of handed over to the franchise in that situation. And that's how it became a lucrative deal, but also very team-friendly. And Mike Brown's already even said he would like Joe Burrow to look at what Mahomes did and consider that, being the kind of deal that he does in Cincinnati. But if you ask me, hey, what's more likely, that it gets done this summer or that it drags on all the way to the fifth-year option kind of situation with Lamar Jackson, I actually think it drags on. I'd be surprised if it got done unless one of those quarterbacks decides, I don't have to reset the market. I don't have to, bunny hop the Lamar Jackson contract. It's just, and here's the complication here. And, we've all done this long enough. You guys obviously been in the NFL. I mean, you have two agents that are going to sit there and go, let's let the other guy get done first.
Right.
let's stop. Let that. So even the agents are sitting there going, we don't want to be the first, if this is a 2-horse race, we don't want to be the first across the finish line. We want to be second to make sure we get that, the new AAV, high. And I can say that our quarterback's the highest paid player in the game.
Charles, we talk so much about the fantasy football aspect of the NFL in terms of the skill position players. We just talked about the quarterbacks. We could talk about the receivers and running backs. But I think like a story that's not being talked about enough that has a lot of significance because this guy's the reigning defensive player of the year in the National Football League. It's only a matter of time till he has the richest contract in NFL history for a defensive player. When does Nick Bosa get his contract signed? When does that deal get done? I think that's a big story coming out of San Francisco, and no one's talking about it. I think it's the situation with Trey Lance and Brock Purdy that, that's all we focus on. But why we're not talking about Nick Bosa and a contract that he's probably going to garner? Yeah,
I think there's a good chance that that's something that gets done going into camp. That's a different situation there. The ownership, they know they will pay players. Even, with the injuries that have happened there, I think there's no question in their minds the way that they've evaluated, Nick Bosa. They felt like this is a guy that, in their minds, they'll argue to you, well, he's been the defensive player of the year 3 years running. Like, we feel like he's been the best player, with all due respect to Aaron Donald. They think they've expressed to Nick that they think that he's the best defensive player in the game. So I don't think there's any worry on their part in terms of getting that done. They're gonna take care of what they can control. What they can't control is how fast Brock Purdy's elbow develops or heals. They can't control, what's going to happen ultimately with Trey Lance, if he's going to be able to, get himself on the track that they need him to get on. If anything, I would almost say if you're like, is that the biggest storyline in San Francisco between those two? what if it's Sam Darnold? Like, what if you have a situation where they're sitting there staring at two quarterbacks in Brock Purdy and Trey Lance and going, well, I don't know, maybe it's Sam Darnold's season up until, training camp. Let's see what Sam's got left and what Kyle can do with him. We'll get the Bosa deal done. He's going to be the highest paid player on defense at some point before the 2023 season. Hopefully Sam Darnold can give us something so that every other part of this team looks fantastic and Super Bowl ready. They need something at quarterback tangible in the next couple of months more than anything.
Just a couple more minutes here with Charles Robinson, the Yahoo senior NFL reporter here on the Rich Eisen Show. And so here we go. Today's May the 4th, Charles. Next Thursday will be May 11th. So I'm already penciling in when the NFL releases its schedule. How do you feel about a Week 5 Thursday night C.J. Stroud, Will Levis matchup? Because they got to get that game out quickly. So a Tennessee versus Houston game early. I'm starting to go through matchups in my mind where they have to happen early because I don't know if I want to see that matchup on primetime TV in Week 17 or Week 14.
Yeah, I'm with you. Let's, especially with the young quarterbacks, let's make sure they're going to put those games on prime time. Let's get them up front because I'm pretty sure all those franchises that took those guys are going to have some struggles to go through by the end of the season. And but yeah, I'd love to see that. I'm curious looking at the quarterbacks that were selected, in the first round, and then obviously Levis. I think we'd agree, like Bryce Young, CJ, those guys will start out of the gate. I want to see how patient Indianapolis will be with Anthony Richardson.
Yeah.
It already sounds to me like, you listen to the owner and he's already pumping him up. Like he might actually start out of the gate. I could not have foreseen that. Listening to other teams say, hey, he really needs a redshirt year. You really want to develop him patiently. Let's not force him and put all these expectations on him out of the gate. And yet when I listen to Jim Irsay, like, it sounds like he's ready to go. He's ready to pencil him in on top of the depth chart. So that to me is really fascinating, how quickly he gets in there. And then Levis, he's going to have to compete. They're going to start him at number 3 on the depth chart. But given how the selection was made, the fact that I think ownership is definitely standing behind Levis on this one and really wanted that pick to be made, I would not be surprised if he gets nudged up as quickly as possible if he shows that, he can get out there and handle it. And then I think just embrace being a leader of men and make sure he stays on the right side of the line between cockiness and arrogance.
Last one before I get you out of here, Charles. The one thing that I'm looking at, too, over the next couple weeks as the NFL will release its schedule, is obviously some teams and how do we feel about them this year? Where last year, remember the Denver Broncos and Russell Wilson, remember how they maxed out on primetime games? And then you have Lamar Jackson, who was injured down the stretch last year. And so we were forced to watch some Raven games without. So for me, I'm just saying the Ravens now, they got the deal done with Lamar Jackson. He is now fully healthy, we think, from the injury that sidelined him the final part of last season. With that deal being done, and he's having a press conference right now, Charles, one thing I want to ask is, have we seen the end of guys representing themselves in terms of the big position like quarterback, or was this just a one-off? Is this over with? Will we see this again down in the future?
I mean, I'd say yes, except let's be real. I mean, he did a good job.
He did.
I was very critical of. I understood at times the need for an agent, especially when he told the Ravens he wanted to be traded. You really need to have an agent at that point because they're working behind the scenes. They're talking to other NFL owners about, would you be willing to sign him to this kind of a contract? Let me tell you what kind of guy Lamar is, why you should invest in him, all these different things. But in a way, he did have an agent. Nicole Lynn at Clutch was his agent. I mean, she did the Jalen Hurts deal. And then, Lamar was able to the Ravens were able to re-engage and say, is that a deal you'd be interested in? And, we'll move the numbers a little north to make sure that you're at the top of the heap. And so, he played as patient as he could. I think it all worked out. That's the one thing about Lamar, I have to admit, is that every time he has decided I'm going to do it my own way, I'm going to bet on myself, In college, I'm going to play quarterback. I don't care what you think. You're not going to move me to wide receiver. You're not going to move me to any other position. This is what I am. I'm a quarterback. He became a great quarterback, right? In the NFL draft, you had some people who suggested, well, maybe he should, showcase his wares at wide receiver just to let teams see what else he can do. Nope. I'm going to be a quarterback. Guess what? Not going to run the 40. Here are the things I'm not going to do. I'm going to have my own quarterback's coach. Not going to have an agent. He made it into the first round, which is a tough road to hoe in the situation that he was in. And then he played this all the way out, and now he's the highest paid player in the NFL. At some point, you shrug and you go, you know what, man, like, I tip my hat to you. You got control of yourself. You're patient. You bet on yourself over and over. You win over and over. I think if players have that kind of talent and I guess that kind of like just honestly courage and will, you can win, but you got to have that kind of talent. Let's not kid ourselves. It's like Roquan Smith did his own deal too, right?
Right.
But where's Roquan Smith? He's one of the best linebackers in the game. I mean, you got to have that kind of talent to be able to pull it off.
Charles, I appreciate that note, by the way, because you reminded me of something, right? You mentioned Nicole Lynn, the agent of Jalen Hurts. The deal that she got for Jalen Hurts was easy because Lamar Jackson was like, okay, I want that. It's kind of similar to me when I go to a new restaurant and you're looking at the menu and you're like, what do I want? But then you look over to the table to the right, you're like, oh yeah, I want that, but let me put a little extra on top of that. So that's just, that's a good comparison there, man. Hey, Charles, I appreciate the time, man. Great to follow your work. And you have fun in the little hiatus that we have of the NFL, man. Appreciate the time.
Absolutely. I appreciate it. Take care.
Catch the Rich Eisen Show every single day on the Roku channel, 12 to 3 Eastern for free.